everyone. Brand Elverston here. For those that may not know me, I spent 22 years at Walmart Corporate in the asset protection division, and more on the strategy side. You know, of course, the traditional scope, the shoplifting, and those things that happen within the box, but more on a total retail loss perspective. Probably about 2005. Our mindset in the division began to change to a more broad and encompassing strategy to attack all elements of shrink, be that malicious or non-malicious. So it was right about also that time frame that I began to get a little bit of a longer corporate leash, and I was able to investigate some non-traditional providers like DARPA, NIST, Lockheed, Boeing, MIT Media Lab, Carnegie Mellon University, Auburn University, and a number of think tanks we went to visit with the message of here are the few pain points of retail in the risk mitigation space. And these are what we need more innovative solutions for. So not looking for lock and show cases, security guards at the front, gates, tethers, EAS alarms. So again, this was, what is that now, 20 years ago. This was a wholesale effort to begin to shake the trees. And I'm happy to say we're in a very different place now, provider-wise. But presumably we'll talk through that here in a few minutes. But more innovative solutions are on the market, scalable, ready, and they are not one-trick ponies. They are in the space of being able to address not only the risk mitigation concerns, i.e. theft, but also operational challenges such as out of stocks, maintaining visibility on features to see if they work or not, if they drive incremental sales, etc. Safety is a huge part of this. So it was probably about 2000 and I'm going to guess about 2007, 2010, somewhere in that neighborhood, that some of the more innovative solutions we're seeing today really started to gain traction. So the passion is always the non-traditional. I'll talk about, as part of this, where I'm headed here in about 4 or 5 days. And some other exciting things. So that's really me. That's my passion, the non-traditional, more innovative. Clearly, artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, all under the umbrella of AI. AI has really, it's not an incremental jump from where we were before, it's a seismic shift. And so Everseen is one of those firms, and I'll mention several, but Everseen was the early guys to the block on the computer vision over self-checkouts to help mitigate losses on self-checkout, which, as we all know, if we're watching the media, has been a huge pain point and a significant contributor to total shrink in any retailer using that method of checkout. The other is RFID. So if you're asking for a headline, and if I'm in the seat, if I were a leader in an asset protection or loss prevention organization in retail, two things I would have my eyes on: AI and RFID. Combined, 1 + 1 = 3. Independently, still game changers, as an overused term, because it allows us in the risk mitigation space to step out of the honest customer's experience. In other words, we're not injecting friction. A perfect solution is one that only the one with malicious intent experiences the friction. And we do have some bridge technologies in the industry, smart locking showcases, things like that. But if you're an honest customer, you still have that friction. So AI gives us the opportunity to move completely out of that friction box, and it's completely transparent to the honest customer. That's the goal of some of the solutions that are out there today, that are ready, scalable, easily installed, not a lot of hardware configuration and density required. Some have none. So AI and RFID really are the headlines of next generation solutions in the risk mitigation space, with clearly broad impact across the entire retail environment, from purchase order creation at pick a CPG. Let's pick on Procter & Gamble. As soon as that PO is cut, if everything, for example, is RFID tagged, we know exactly what we're getting throughout the entire supply chain. We have visibility throughout the entire supply chain. We have visibility upon receiving and cross-docking at the target distribution network when those trucks come in. And so for once, we really truly do know what we're paying for. And that is the beginning of where things get a little opaque in the merchandise shrink perspective, is that before we start, automatically waving the theft flag, how do we know we ever even received it? Because in most major retailers, nobody is item level counting anything. I don't care, if it's Dollar General, if it's Target, it's Walmart, those trucks pull up to the back door. There's a system that downloads your receiving electronically, of course, paying the bill, but nobody breaks open the seal on a tractor trailer and sits there with 20 people counting every eyeliner pencil, every Crest white strips, every TV that comes off the truck. So it eliminates that ambiguity when you say, did I receive it? So those two are very, very important. If the desire is to truly, number one, have visibility, and what we don't have today, no retailer has it, meaning they had no visibility to item level shrink across their environments. And then the AI introduced that on the sales floor, being able to monitor both malicious and non-malicious customer engagement, and provide that safety barrier without interfering with honest customers, which is a huge, look at Walgreens, I believe it was CVS that was on major news lately, Target. A lot of those senior executives are admitting locking showcases reduce sales. They might impact the losses and depending on your disciplines in the store of keeping those locked, but they certainly do reduce sales. Couple of great examples, and there are a few firms out there that do this. So imagine typical scenario in a store, and we've seen it all over social media. A gang comes in, they go to whatever items they want to steal a bunch of. So if I'm in an Ulta store and I come in and clean out, you name it, eyeliner, pencils, whatever, AI can sit on top of existing camera networks in most stores, provided, they have modern day technology, but it's a software application, sits on top of the cameras and understands the difference between a customer removing one or two of a product versus one that is raking off the shelf, and being able to do a real-time alert for however the retailer wants to configure that. Is it an email? Hopefully not. Is it a text? Is it an overhead announcement? Customer service needed in aisle 6. Is it multi-layer? In other words, not only does the department manager get notification, the store manager gets it, the district manager, whomever they like, to be able to predict and always make the assumption. Most retailers will always tell you there's always an assumption that it's a customer service engagement, never an attack. So you can do what you want, but the first response to that scenario would hopefully not be police officers, because it truly could be somebody buying a lot of X. So self-checkout, same thing. So you go into any retailer and you see a bank of self-checkouts. Rarely is it ever one or two, unless it's Dollar General, and we know they backed out of self-checkouts for these reasons we're talking about. But if you go into any retailer of size, you have sometimes a dozen or more, maybe 24 self-checkout terminals with 1, 2, maybe 3 store employees kind of roaming the area and looking around. Not exactly a controlled environment, semi-controlled, I'd call it. But the AI that can sit on top of those cameras that are installed over each self-checkout can easily tell, hey, you just hit tender, you literally scanned 4 items and there's 6 still in the cart. And do, again, a real-time alert. Pay station attendant comes over, engages, oh, I'm sorry, the system didn't ring up these other 6 items in your cart. Would you like to pay for them now? And typically that's the script that unfolds. 2 things are happening when you have these types of technologies. Number 1, and most important, there is no friction to the honest customer. In both of those scenarios, nothing would have ever happened in an honest, typical shopping environment. Secondarily, when these instances do occur and flag potential malicious intent, it sends a message to the would-be crook that we have systems that you cannot see, and we are monitoring, i.e. inventory, out of stocks, self-checkout behaviors, anomalies, etc., and that we do something about it. Depending on what that notification is, you'll be approached by a store employee or an associate, whatever they're called, to come over and engage. And crooks hate that. Crooks love being able to walk into, for example, a 185,000 square foot Walmart store, and you've got, a couple of 3 people on the front end, and everybody else is running around filling curbside or pickup orders. Nobody's watching or actively engaging with the customer base. That is nirvana for crooks. They do not like engagement. They don't like somebody walking up saying, hey, good morning. What can I help you find? Did you see everything over here in, cases for the iPhone you have in your hand, etc.? They hate that. So it provides that 24/7 engagement, and it elevates the element of risk for the would-be thief. And again, a lot of what I'm discussing, and rightfully so, is around shoplifting, which is a component of total loss. So, if you look at some of the studies that are out there, and I've talked about this on CNBC, News Nation, Wall Street Journal, you name it, is a mischaracterization that everything that a retailer loses. So when they say, for example, last year, $112 billion was lost to theft, that's incorrect. The $112 billion tabulates all losses, of which shoplifting, internal theft are components. And back to the introduction part of the technology that you asked me about, without that item level visibility, without knowing that the CPG did in fact ship everything correctly that is on my $200 million invoice coming into my retail establishment, without that item level visibility and accountability throughout the entire supply chain, we don't know that we actually received it. So, and those typically are non-malicious. Something happened in the CPG, they misfilled an order. Anybody that's in supply chain knows things happen. It's not always malicious intent. So all of those things together give you that 112 billion. And when you talk about ORC, that gets a ton of media attention because frankly, it's like a cop's video on social media. It's entertaining. And again, the mischaracterization is that ORC is all day, every store, which is incorrect. The fresh headline to it, though, is the violence, and that is alarming, and it's dangerous and sometimes deadly. So ORC has been around since retailers opened their doors. So all of those are components of that 112 billion, and without item level visibility, i.e. RFID on every item, then it's guesswork. And the broader thinking retailers know that, you know what, in aggregate, probably more than half of my total losses are non-malicious, i.e. administrative, misship, screwing up claims, fat finger in price changes, you name it. And then a less significant component is the malicious intent. When you boil that down to regions and stores, of course, they will look very different. If you go into some tough high crime areas, of course, the malicious intent numbers will be a higher penetration in that total. But in aggregate, a broad thinking asset protection loss prevention professional fully understands there's way more to that shrink number than crooks. Both can contribute. I am less a fan of robotics, in other words, physical robots in the stores, because you have to think about the ones that do the most damage. So again, we're focused on the malicious intent. The thieves that do the most damage are those ORC gangs. It's not the high school kid or the youngster coming in and stealing a video game or something out of family planning categories or a six-pack of beer. Sure, those are losses, but the real damage is done on a per frequency basis, much more significant in organized retail crime or those violent theft rings. So the technologies that are out there can do a number of things. And let's go to robotics specifically. So if a robot's roaming around the store, and I first saw those introduced in a German retailer, Metro, years and years and years and years ago. But it was more of customer service. You would walk into the foyer, the robot would say, "Good morning, what can I help you find?" And you could speak to it, "I would like a tennis racket," or whatever. And it would tell you to follow me and turn and take you there. Depending on the retailer, that is something that would make a difference. And there are retailers that a robot would last about 20 minutes in a sales floor environment through either vandalism or you name it, a host of options. So yes, robotics in the box can do that. Now, of course, the buy online, pick up in store and filling those mobile orders out of stores is a big deal. And you have many, if you go into any Target or Walmart store, you see, go in earlier mornings, 7, 8 o'clock, and you'll see numerous store employees running around with blue carts or red carts, filling those mobile orders to get them done. So in a perfect world, could that be a robot? Could be. But I think the power of the visual intelligence is probably a more compelling and broadly applied solution. In other words, anywhere I have a camera, I have eyes. I can put any software I want on those cameras. If I want to see anything on a shelf run, so 60-foot shelf run, whatever it is, 80-foot, as long as I have a camera on it, I can do a number of things with an AI solution, computer vision. I can tell you out of stocks. I can tell you whether the planogram you use for that 4, 8, 12, 60-foot section is in compliance or not. I can tell immediately if the new planogram has been set. So if my new planogram compliance date to be set was, in Florida, let's say, spring pool supplies coming out, we could tell without having to spend payroll to go have third-party firms or stores self-report, yes, this planogram is set, new merchandise is out, we know this. So there are a number of things that the eyes can tell you that is, frankly, a lot less expensive than robotics, physical robots in the stores. Now, robots have their place in possibly the back of the store, automation of filling those orders. So when I go get all the merchandise off the sales floor, put it all in the tote and put it on the conveyor belt, from there, yes, robotics makes perfect sense to slot it, whether it's, refrigerated or not, and get it ready for when that customer comes, pull it out of the refrigerator, down a conveyor belt, much like a distribution center. All of that, yes, but I think the real offering, so you go to NRF, I'm going to Germany here Friday for Eurosys Retail Tech Conference, and we already know this in the last 3 or 4 years. You can't go anywhere in a retail trade show now and not engage with everyone saying they do artificial intelligence. Now, it's like every other hype technology. Some really truly are, and others are aspiring and trying to make it work and really find themselves in a position where I need to say that, but I really don't understand the environment I'm working in and what the true pain points are. So I'm excited about that opportunity. NRF, all the feedback I got from NRF was almost overwhelming AI, and it really took a concerted effort to spend time in a booth to understand what is it you solve for. Instead of we can solve world peace or boil the ocean, we can do anything you want us to do, rather than here's our sweet spot. Here's a great example. Zero Eyes, out of Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. I hope I pronounced that right. They are the gold standard in identifying potential active shooters. So think about in a parking lot, anywhere you have cameras, again, it's software, and it sits on that existing camera network. Nothing happens, not streaming live video, but when it sees something that it's been trained to think is a weapon, immediate notification, and within seconds, you have a decision to make in one of their operations centers. Look at that, is that truly a weapon, or is that a hockey stick, or to make sure that we have no false positives? And you can imagine the downstream potential for something like that, to know in advance somebody pulled out an AK-47 in a parking lot 150 feet out. You can do a number of things with that. Sorry, fighting summer cold or winter colds. So, and again, it's like any other AI solution. It's SaaS model, subscriptions, it doesn't matter. A lot cheaper, but it solves for, in that specific case, it is a specific technology designed for one threat. A little bit different than if you go inside the store and say, yeah, we can detect out of stocks. We can tell you when somebody didn't ring something up on the, it is really one specialization. Others can be, for example, Occicon for liquids on the floor, being able to do real-time alerts again through your existing camera network. We all know that when you go into a store, and it's more of a problem in grocery stores because of, produce, the misters that are on top, people drop grapes, bananas, whatever on the floor. But when you have a slip and it's unattended, and in the age of reduced staffing on the sales floor, which every retailer is experiencing since COVID, how long is it going to sit there before somebody falls? And that is tens of thousands, if not potentially millions of dollars, that retailer is now paying out. So again, on top of existing camera networks. So I guess another way of saying it, in my now 30 plus years in the industry, when I came into the retail industry at Walmart Corporate, the solution set was very small in 1995. It was EAS or lock and show cases. And that pretty much remained dormant until about 2008, 2010-ish, when artificial intelligence, computer vision became a thing, and we began to be able to mitigate losses on self-checkout. And then, of course, everybody, as we all know, artificial intelligence is all over the place in retail. It is the sexy headline of the era. So we now have more solutions. So if I'm in the seat at a major retailer and I'm in charge of risk mitigation, shrink, safety, whatever the title is, we're not in the same place that Brand Elverston was in 1990, in the late 90s, or even the early 2000s, where, you know what, you had 2 or 3 things you could do, and that was it. We are still slow as an industry to adopt those changes, meaning to move away from the legacy and say, you know what, enough. AI is where we need to go. We need to remove friction from the shopping experience, not introduce it. We need to get away from physical barriers and law enforcement at the doors, et cetera, et cetera. We are slowly, as an industry, slowly getting to that realization that it's time to get away from legacy solutions. And often in some of the social media conversations I've had, have we arrived at our Sputnik moment? So the last couple of years, I can't think of a single retailer that hasn't been throat punched on shrink levels, 2x, some 3x from what they traditionally had. And my hope was, and as a retailer, was that the pain would have been hard enough for those that write the big checks, the audit committees on the board of directors, asking what in the heck is going on with shrink. That it's time to start investing and writing some checks and doing something different, because clearly what we're doing now isn't working. So that being said, there are bright spots in the industry. I always call out Joe Call, Vice President of Asset Protection with Macy's. He is doing more than anybody that I know of in retail with RFID and shrink visibility. He's getting his arms around, as Mike Grain often uses the phrase, RFID is the flashlight in the darkroom. We don't know anything really beyond estimations and sophisticated guesswork. But when you item level RFID tag, the ambiguity is gone. And you start learning things that you probably didn't know before. And the mystery becomes less of a mystery, and you begin to understand how these lost instances happen. And it could be you find out a supplier had a hiccup in their warehouse and you didn't get product X. It could be the product wasn't counted during inventory because it was in a different part of the store and missed. Or it could be going out the back door with internal theft or the front door with shoplifters. So we are making progress in the industry, but I think we're still a bit slow in saying enough. We need a seismic shift to AI and get aggressive about it. And RFID, and of course, those two combined, as I shared before, are 1 + 1 = 3. Those two together would dramatically change the landscape of shrink management and risk, physical security also. Let me separate those two. So facial rec from behavioral. Behavioral is what I referenced before with the AI, the cameras in the aisle that can tell. Normal is 1 or 2 products coming off the shelf in a backpack. That's fine, because you might be using their mobile app or whatever. Not normal is raking off the entire shelf. Dwell times on modulars. If I'm a buyer, I want to know if the modular that I set, are people looking at it, or are the heat, does the heat mapping show that it's always green in front of my end cap with soccer balls or whatever the cool thing is, or Super Bowl Sunday, hopefully beer, chips, that kind of stuff. Facial rec's very different. So, and I want to make sure I'm clear about this. Both are on the cameras. Both can be software solutions. Both are invisible to the honest customer and the dishonest until there's an engagement. But the separation occurs in the so what. So in the aisle, I, as a store employee, would very much like to know real time or within time to be able to react that I have that instance of mass removal of product. I need to know that so I can go engage and do whatever protocol the retailer has set up. Facial recognition, proven technology, it works. But the scenario is that always is the head scratchers with retailers is what I have been very successfully used over my years in retail is at some point you got to say, so what? After all the complexity, 15 petabytes of PowerPoints, it's cool, it's sexy, wow, this is going to make us so cool, we're going to get headlines. So what? When the technology does what you ask it to do, it's useless if you don't do something. Because again, keep in mind, these technologies are invisible to a customer until it's been trained to alert on something. So if you don't do that something, it doesn't matter. So let's paint the picture of facial recognition. I walk into Walmart, and I'm just using them as an example, Target, and pick your retailer. I walk into the Apple store. They have facial recognition. It recognizes me, depending on their use case. Now, it could be member loyalty if I'm in a membership club, Costco or Sam's. I could be greeted, which honestly, I wouldn't like that if somebody would walk up to me from the store and say, oh, hey, Mr. Elverston, how are you? Great to see you again. We saw you bought X, Y, and Z last week. Do you need it again? I don't need that. Some customers do. But the facial recognition challenge becomes, so what? When you identify, so paint the picture that if it's used primarily for shrink management, well, logically, I would probably have the system tell me that that person is a known crook. However, they have the database set up. If there's, the FBI's top 10 local warrants of arrest, if they've, worked with the Austin PD and they have their top 10 people in there in a picture. So what? You identify Brand Elverston and there's a warrant for bank robbery, domestic abuse, firearms violation, whatever. What do you expect that store to do with that? And the answer should be nothing, because they are not trained police officers on the sales floor to be able to handle, hopefully, and safely resolve what is likely to happen, which could be a violent confrontation. Secondarily, misidentification. No technology is 100% perfect. So while you can typically in most facial rec software programs, you can scale the match rate to say, unless it's 90% match, don't alert me, 95%, 80%, pick your number. So you either have to have complete faith before you do a so what, or you have to question, what am I doing with this? What is this actually doing for me? So the business case is distinctly different in facial rec in terms of so what. And it, anybody that's been in retail or any lawyers listening to this, it could be litigation hell with a misidentification. That an overzealous store associate says, holy crap, I got an alert. This guy's wanted by the Austin PD. Calls Austin PD and they scramble 15, patrol cars or a SWAT team, and guess what? Not the guy. Lawsuits happen $100 million later. You got to question it. So the use cases become critical, and the question that absolutely has to be asked every single time is to not get caught up in the hype and say, if this works perfectly, so what? What am I going to do with the output? So that's really the division of those two. And it is distinctly different. They're very different in that so what scenario. One I've already talked about, RFID. Albeit slow as molasses in adoption. RFID, and I remember when I was with Walmart in the late 90s, we went up to the MIT Auto ID Center, late 90s. Dr. Sanjay Sarma, he's a rock star. Everybody knows who he is in RFID world and academia, MIT professor. Even back then, we were looking at the what if. Now, obviously, when it started, it was supply chain and inventory management. But even back in the late 90s, there were a few questions in the ballpark of, if you can give me accountability and visibility throughout the entire supply chain of this product and help me lower inventory levels and get my arms around what I own, et cetera, lowering inventory costs, carrying costs, what else can it do? And even back then, but that was the late 90s, so 25, 30 years ago, we're still in some degrees in the baby step process. Higher penetration in apparel retailers with RFID, because apparel, anybody that's in retail knows that can be a nightmare trying to understand and get your arms around your inventory. It's just very, very hard to do. And the use case and the ROI of having RFID on apparel is clear, significant, and quick. But RFID in shrink management, again, so let me walk you through this scenario, and this is common among most retailers. So when you do the annual inventory, and the purpose of which is to reconcile your financial ledgers with what you physically own, and elaborate formulas, but basically say, well, your ledger said you should have had this when I counted it, and I didn't. I had 8, and your ledger says I should have had 10. That's shrink. Oversimplification, but basically that's what the annual inventories or cyclical inventories do. They help true up what your ledgers are saying. So where is that $2? That's labeled as shrink, and that's where the ambiguity comes in. So most retailers can break that down to maybe department level. So you get a total store number, you lost $2. Most retailers' inventory systems will report to those 30 departments in the store that add up to that $2. So they know that. They can tell that electronics or hardware or maybe even produce, depending on the inventory counting method. But under that, when I say that I lost $2 and $1.50 of it was in electronics, let's use that scenario, I don't have that disaggregation to every item in the department to know, wow, it was largely in iPhones and new release video games, different than catalog. We don't know that. Most retailers, in fact, I've yet to meet one that does know true financial item level shrink. Loads of estimations, and I can comfortably say that because I ran that group at Walmart when I was there, and a lot of smart people, but at the end of the day, they're sophisticated estimations. You don't get a report that says your top retail cost shrink item for this inventory period as a result of this inventory was 80-inch Vizio TVs. You don't have that. So as we know, a guess based on a guess becomes more diluted the more decisions you make along that guesswork. So that's what you see today. You walk into, for example, Walgreens, virtually everything's locked up. Everything is not a high theft item. Everything is not an item that gets short shipped. So if imagine, if you will, in a Walgreens, if I truly knew everything about every item in that store, even if it's not real time, 24 hours later, at least now I have a very clear picture on where my risks are, and I can far more intelligently and economically protect and be able to understand it disappeared because of theft. So I need to do something in the store to, lock it up, secure it. Or, you know what? Surprisingly, Tide liquid jugs, they're not walking out the front door. They're not even getting to the store. So you can do some backstream and say, wait a minute, for some reason, those 18 tractor trailer loads didn't come to this regional distribution center. It went to Chicago instead of Memphis. Didn't get stolen. So why in the heck are you locking it up on the sales floor? That's what's causing a lot of the friction, if you will, for all customers. So if you lock something up, it affects everybody, not just the crook, it's everybody. And I'll say this because I know we have more to cover, but what's different in 1995 than it is since 2004, it's last 20 years. Customers have more options. In 1995, if I locked something up and it was the new release, video game, they would wait. They'd hit the ding. Yeah, they'd get frustrated, but what other option did you have? You either wait or you don't get it. Today, I walk into Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, Target. If what I want is locked up, guess what? 15 seconds on a smartphone, Amazon.com or Walmart.com, I can order it, turn around, and have it on the way to my house before I leave the store. I don't have to put up with that anymore. A couple of things happen. You lose all capability for impulse sales. Me roaming around the store. If I walk in and I see everything in electronics locked up, let's say I'm in Dusseldorf, for example, next week, and I need a charger. I walk into an electronics retailer and everything's locked up. Screw it. I know where else I can get it more quickly with zero hassle. So we've seen it in the press. Amazon is loving it because they are seeing a bump. People are flat frustrated with everything being locked up. And when you start peeling the onion back, the root cause is because we really don't definitively know item level shrink. It's a lot of guesswork. And I hate to say it, but emotion. You see one group run out the door with eyeliner pencils. It's that survivorship bias from World War II. When the planes came back and they had bullet holes in them, they started beefing up the structure around those bullet holes instead of saying, wait a minute, what about the planes that don't come back? That's the ones we need to focus on. So instead of protecting where the bullet holes are, protect where they aren't. And that applies to retail shrink. Don't get caught up in the hype saying, oh, wow, I saw them all come in and steal all the leather jackets, so we're putting all of those in the back room and one on the shelf. It's more complicated than that. Let me kick that out to 10 years only because the retail risk mitigation, asset protection, loss prevention industry is not on the same pace of innovation as the rest of the store. I could be harsh and say it is decades, if not generations behind in some cases. So whatever the time frame is, in the little bit more distant future, I think, and something that I am personally working on, and I've been vocal about it on LinkedIn, social media, is the opportunity of holograms. So think about, all retailers will get this, but the before and after picture of staffing in retail before and after the pandemic. I don't think a single retailer is back to pre-COVID staffing levels for a number of reasons, but more likely the finance mentality is, wait a minute, I reduced payroll by 30, 40%, pick a number. We survived. We still sold stuff. We gained quote unquote efficiencies. So I don't need that anymore. So why go back to it? Because payroll, as we all know, is probably the single biggest, if not the biggest, line on a P&L. So it's real easy to make a real quick difference with a lot of money manipulating that number. So if we're never going to go back, and I talked about in the beginning, the visible deterrent, people on the sales floor matter. Retailers that think it doesn't, they're probably proportionately higher shrink than the retailers that actually put people on the floor, like a Nordstrom's or Best Buy, for example, when they have people roaming and they aren't tasked to death and not engaging with customers. A hologram. So some of this audience will get this. I'm old enough to remember Star Trek, kind of the Beam Me Up, Scotty, where you saw the pixelation and it looked like a snowstorm. And then all of a sudden, a 3D image appeared. Well, that's today. There are a couple of firms out there. The one that I am most focused on is Hypervision, based out of London. Proto is another one that looks more like a phone booth. We've seen all these guys on social media. There are others. But the use case is beyond what it is today, which is an elaborate Zoom meeting for one of them. The others are more marketing and merchandising application. So you go into London Heathrow, for example, you'll see holograms / avatars, not everywhere, but they're there. And they can have a conversation with you. If you're brand Elverston and you're exhausted and it's been a long flight, where in the heck do I find American Airlines Flight 716 to Berlin? They can tell you that. It can be captivating. It's different. So let's extend the bookends on the use case beyond the marketing and merchandising and the coolness of it, because it is cool. How about if on those same existing cameras, or maybe even a scalable, not very expensive projector, if you will, in key departments in a store. So let's say certainly electronics, maybe high-end power tools if I'm a Home Depot, expensive small items, pipe fittings, etc., cosmetics, you name it. How about if when I walk into that store and I'm in that aisle and I'm dwelling for, I don't know, more than 20 seconds, you could have that hologram appear. It's going to freak the customer out, but two things are happening that I mentioned before. Number one, if I'm a crook and I have ill intent, I don't like that. It makes me question what other hard word surveillance is going on in that store that greatly amplifies my risk of apprehension and consequence. So, but on the customer service side, and again, low staffing departments or no staffing in some cases, you could have a meaningful conversation with that hologram. Well, hello, I see you've been, taking a look at Crest White Strips. Is there anything that I can help you with? And after you get over the shock of this image you're talking to, and you undoubtedly put your hand through it, and it's like, this really isn't a person, you can have a conversation. Now, the business case is that monitored in the back of a store, or is that managed at a market, or managed through ChatGPT or AI to be able to have those conversations and answer the most frequently asked questions? And then when you run out of gas on the script, you can alert and have a real person come. But to me, that is, so you have AI, you have RFID, that gives you what we've talked about at length. The substitute, or the augmentation, if you will, for the lack of customer service comes in those technologies that are out there. I think within the next certainly 5 years, I would hope that while these may more quickly penetrate, when you walk into, say, a Walmart store, you're probably more likely to see a hologram on the corner of two major pathways, Action Alley they call it, with a mannequin as the 3D image, and they are styling whatever it is they're trying to sell the most of. Captures here, you're like, wow, this is cool. And the rest of the marketing story unfolds. But again, just like RFID with a use case of shrink visibility and AI, why stop with purely the operational core of business case? Why not extend it to risk mitigation? So the more thoughtful and present asset protection, loss prevention leadership will understand I can do all of that stuff for you in marketing and merchandising. But guess what? I can also use it on a few cameras that are my hotspots in the store to provide that virtual customer service. So really long answer to your question. I think it's in holograms / avatar, depending on the application. I think that's the next visibly present engagement inside of a retail store. So with all of that experience in retail, across the board, I might have mentioned in the beginning, more interested in the what's next than what did we have yesterday. So I'm not in the box of legacy solutions, the conventional measures we talked about a lot, because there's some new and exciting things out there, and there are typically coming from non-traditional providers, those that are not already in the risk mitigation space. So the startups, now that AI is pretty much everywhere, RFID has been everywhere, holograms, those are the kinds of things that I look for. And the reason I go to Germany every February is to ferret out those small yet very interesting technologies that are on display in true startup fashion, that are yet mature enough for clear definition on business case. It's cool, but we might need a little help figuring out the so what. What are those retail pain points I talked about? I don't need you to come in and boil the ocean. I need option A and option B solved. Otherwise, you're a nice to have. A need to have is A and B. So it's in the non-traditional, it's in the smaller tech firms, it is in the no customer friction space. So not into gadgets and lanyards and, all that kind of stuff that's frankly been out there forever. The retail customer has way too many options to be frustrated with those types of things that they just had to deal with even 10, 12 years ago. They don't have to anymore. So the landscape's changed. The threats have intensified through the violence, so we have to add in that multiple. But it is to bring to light all of these more truly innovative solutions with a clear value proposition to my retail friends across the globe, not just the US, to change the industry, to get us out of the cops and robbers ditch and put us at the round table, the C-suite, as a player in a multitude of applications instead of, hey, shrink's bad, it's got to be theft, go fix that asset protection. If that's the conversation, the train has been missed. That's not where we need to be as an industry. So that's my passion, moving the needle and truly doing something different. And it's been a lifelong passion since 1995, the first day I walked into Walmart from my hanging up my active duty uniform.